Oh, hello, Stephen Purvis. Before we chat about your project, All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers, would you please tell me what it was like to work on Brian De Palma's Body Double?
That was a very interesting experience. One of the most unique experiences ever. First of all, De Palma is a master filmmaker. I mean, he's really brilliant. And and he had a great editor, Jerry Greenberg, who cut The French Connection. So, really an amazing team to be working with. And one of the things that's very interesting about Body Double was, so I got into ADR editing because I like to work. I wanted to work with directors to see how they worked with actors because that's what you do, right?
Hmm.
And so in this instance, De Palma was not happy with the performance of the lead actress. And
Oh,
so we actually revoiced the lead actress. We totally
oh,
ADR'd every line she did in the entire movie. I had never done anything like that. I mean, I had a lot of experience, but I'd never done anything where we're going to replace the voice
hmm.
throughout the entire picture and stuff. So that was a really unique experience. He brought in an actress who's actually now a successful director, Helen Shaver, and so Helen sort of redid the performance and stuff. But De Palma was amazing. We got to a point and he said, okay, I'm going to include a music video sequence in this.
Yeah.
And we're going, man, the film seems pretty solid the way it is. And he said, no, we'll shoot it on the weekend and we'll cut it in and stuff. And I didn't, I was going, okay, whatever. And then they went and shot this music video and then just dropped it into the movie. It was like it had always been there. I mean, he was,
Iconic scene, too.
yeah, exactly.
I
He's,
love Body Double. Thank you for indulging me on that one. Big
yeah,
Body
sure.
Double fan. All
Yeah.
right. So, did you ever feel like your group of friends at the time became a group of strangers to you?
No, no, never. In fact, I'm still in touch with a lot of I mean, I'm good friends with all the people I've worked with kind of throughout the years and stuff. We've all sort of scattered and into different directions. What's interesting is almost everybody I've worked with, and I started as like a PA and kind of worked my way up. Everybody wasn't doing it for the same reason. We all wanted to be filmmakers. That was the goal, right? And it's interesting how different people get off on different tangents and stuff. Like I saw presentation recently with Ben Bird at the Academy Museum. And he showed some of his student films from USC, and he's working with a good buddy of mine, Richard Anderson, who he and Ben collaborated on a bunch of stuff. They worked on, Star Wars, Raiders, I mean, all these great movies. And at the end of the day, Richard Anderson, after doing years of working as a sound editor, now he's working as a director, making his own films. So it's like, the thirst for it never leaves you. Sometimes you get sidetracked and, fall into a different path.
All right. So yeah, I watched chapter one of All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers. How many chapters do you have planned for this?
There's 13 chapters total.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And how's it going to be distributed?
Well, this is a good question. We do not have distribution at this point. So the plan was to do one chapter and sort of introduce the characters
Hmm.
and show everyone like, okay, these are the main characters. We'll be following their path. And are they interesting, funny, quirky enough? And especially with the character of Danny Deck, the main character, the idea was, okay, here's a naive young man. We've all been young, we've all been naive. Sometimes you make mistakes when you're young that you live to regret later and
Oh,
stuff. And you can kind of see that that's what's going to happen. This relationship with Sally, she's definitely somebody who's got way out of his league, and so he should be questioning the whole basis of this relationship. But the idea is to follow them on their path. And in the next chapter, we join them in Houston. They got married, real quick marriage, because she put it out there. She wants to have a baby, but she can't do it illegitimately. So she wants to get married and have a kid. And Danny's just a vessel. I mean, he's just kind of the first stop on the train ride and stuff. And it's interesting because in a lot of McMurtry's novels, he writes very strong female characters. And many
hmm.
times his male characters are kind of naive about the way of the world, whereas the women seem to be more in tune with this is how things really work. Sort of I guess what they've had to learn to survive, you could say.
So let's say this comes to a streaming service.
Yeah.
Would you want like a chapter to come like every like few days or a week, or would you want it just like all out at
Well,
once?
the kind of the TV model and sort of the cable model, like if you look at what HBO and some of the and Showtime, one of the cable and streaming services, sort of cable services that are now streaming, They
Yeah.
typically drop a new episode every week. Now,
Right.
the streaming exclusive services, um, Netflix, they tend to just drop everything at once. But I
Yeah.
noticed, like, I've been watching some Apple stuff lately, and like Apple actually does the same thing. It's kind of like once a week you'll get a Ted Lasso, and then and then you can wait and binge it all if you want to. But it kind of gets you coming back, and they realize that once they've got you, then maybe there's a chance you'll watch something else. So I think that's the idea here is you drop one a week.
Okay. Cool. So when you're recreating the 1960s, what are details you want to really focus on?
Well, the main thing that in the short, what we did to focus on was essentially you start with architecture. You got to make sure you got, a location that wasn't built since then.
Yeah.
And that also determines a lot of things as a producer. That really determines where everybody's going to meet up, where you're all going to be, what the day is going to be like, what you're trying to get accomplished. And then from there, you then come down to production design. So it's really dressing the location so
Mm.
everything is fairly authentic to the look, to the time period. And then, after that comes costumes. And then in our instance, we got lucky with the cars. We found a gentleman who had a bunch of vintage cars that he loaned
Nice.
to us because he wanted to, his girlfriend's an actress and she wanted to be in the film. So I cast her in the dance sequence, and then he's one of the extras in the film, along with his son-in-law and his daughter. I mean, we got the whole family there.
And the music too, right? That's pretty
Oh
integral.
yeah. Yeah, the music, and in fact, that's what I've sort of in my pitch, that's what I'm pitching, is that the music is what carries it. And what I've sort of styled it after is sort of the films that Truffaut made in that period,
Okay.
but also Easy Rider is an influence. And strangely enough, Shampoo is also an influence, which even though it was made later, it's
Yeah.
actually about that time period. But the music is what really helps you to sell the period, because the music is all kind of classic rock now, but
Yeah.
at that time it was kind of unique to that feeling. And it also gives you a sense of the feeling. Especially what I've tried to do is what they did with Easy Rider, where they used popular songs as the soundtrack. So there's not really a score to Easy Rider, it's really just songs playing. So that's kind of my influence there.
Cool. Nice. I'm reading that book right now, Easy Riders, Raging Bulls.
Yeah,
And
great book.
yeah, it's fun, huh? And
Yeah.
like Shampoo, like yeah, you realize that script had been kicking around for a while.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. And also, but it has the kind of feeling which we're going for, and All My Friends really captures. It's interesting because when you read the novel All My Friends, then you start to see other films that were influenced. Like Truffaut made some films, The Man Who Loved Woman, and there have been films that were kind of influenced by it. And in McMurtry's memoir, he talks about how, throughout the years he get calls from famous filmmakers sort of inquiring about the novel and what kind of take they'd have on it. Like there's an interesting discussion that he had with Mike Nichols, for instance. But
Oh,
Nichols ultimately passed because he had done The Graduate, and he kind of felt like, well, maybe, I'm kind of revisiting something I've already done. I want to steer clear of that.
right. Okay, so what is it about the writing that attracts you to the material?
Well, first of all, the naive young man who's you can see the train wreck coming. He was going, "Don't get involved, don't get involved." And in the novel, all of his friends are telling him, "Why are you doing this? She's bad. Can't you see this?" But he's just so smitten because she's so much out of his league. She's much better than anything he has the right to expect, and very much kind of, from what I've been able to discern from McMurtry, kind of similar to what happened to him, which is he went from the farm to college. No one in his family had ever gone to college. And when you get to college, there are a lot of very ambitious, intelligent people there. And suddenly you find yourself a little out of your depth. You may be a smart person, but you got people who are much more worldly that you're hanging out with. And in the 60s, the norms were breaking down. We had, women's liberation was a big thing, make love, not war. Everybody was protesting against the Vietnam War, et cetera. So all the sort of societal norms are being protested. Don't trust anyone over 30. I mean, all these things were sort of
Mhm.
part of the mantra of the 60s. And I think, McMurtry kind of got caught up in this. And in fact, this novel is very autobiographical. He was married for a short period of time, long enough to have a kid who ultimately became James McMurtry, the folk singer. So
Oh,
it's
cool.
so it's very autobiographical in that way. And in terms of trying to portray the era, I'm trying to kind of give it a sense of what's going on and how things were different then, and everybody felt like there were a lot of possibilities that we'd never thought about.
Yeah. And how do you approach adaptation? How did you approach the writing?
Well, I started off being very literal about it
Mhm.
because I felt like, okay, I want to do it justice. And I was in conversations with McMurtry about it and stuff. And basically, he said, don't worry about it. I've had enough experience doing these things. I've written scripts forever. And
Mhm.
don't worry about being literal. Just worry about trying to capture the essence of what's there. So in my adaptation, I basically you take the characters, you make sure that you're honest with those characters, and then because it's a novel, you try to condense it if you're turning it into a feature. That's why I wanted to do it as a sort of a longer form, as a limited series, because
Yeah.
I felt like then and also there have been various adaptations of this novel that have been written over the years, which I've read most of.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing was there's some very funny scenes in the book that never got into the feature film adaptations.
Hmm.
And also the way the novel plays out, it goes to kind of a dark place toward the end. Like it's very kind of comedic and funny, but then sort of the 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 sort of nature of the of what's going on at that time kind of interferes with the fun quality of it, and it
Mhm.
ends up in kind of a dark place, which is why a lot of filmmakers liked it because it has a very ambiguous kind of dark ending. And so in looking at it, I'm going, well, there's a bunch of funny stuff that happens right before this sort of before it takes this dark turn. And by doing it as a series, I can include that. Like there's a whole just a really goofy, crazy scene that takes place when McMurtry in the novel, he moves to, or not McMurtry, Danny Deck, he moves to San Francisco with Sally because that's where the real writers live. So you're plopped down in San Francisco in the 60s with all the anti-war stuff and the free love movement and stuff. And then he goes to Stanford to visit his buddy Ken Kesey, who's at Stanford, and gets involved with that crowd. There's a very artistic, sort of literary crowd at Stanford studying under Wallace Stegner at Stanford. And then finally, he ends up going back to Texas. Well, on the way back, he stops to visit his uncle, who's this crazy rancher out in West Texas, who has this ranch where every night he and his foreman of his ranch go and sit on the hillside waiting for a Zapata to ride up from Mexico and liberate Texas.
Mhm.
And so, but it's this crazy, crazy sequence involving goats and cowboys and just it's never made it into any of the feature film adaptations of the novel. And I went, well, if I do this as a limited series, then I can include this really bizarre, funny situation with the with Uncle Lorenzo in the series, which I think, I think people like fun comedic stuff, especially coming out of the pandemic. I think we all want something a little lighter to
Sure.
entertain us.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, was the party scene difficult to shoot?
Yeah, it was only because it's anytime you're trying to corral a bunch of actors and get them to do stuff in a crowded situation, it's hard to, it's like herding cats. So,
I
thank,
guess so, yeah.
thankfully I had some really good ADs and trying to get everybody to do the same thing. You're doing multiple takes and you're trying to get everybody to do the same thing, but all these actors are like, well, it's improvisation time because we were using actors as opposed to using extras. And so that was kind of interesting, was sort of getting them all on the same page, making sure everybody hit the same mark each time, that kind of thing. But ultimately, it worked out pretty well. I was very happy with it.
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it. So, okay, Stephen, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll keep an eye out for All My Friends Are Going to Be Strangers.
Thank you
Coming,
so much. I appreciate it. Have a good day,
coming to
rest of your
where,
day.
I don't know, but somewhere soon, hopefully.
Somewhere soon.
All right.